Jordan Burnt Peterson was recently in a 1 versus 20 debate bros sort of video, and I've seen a clip of it that somebody shared on my Discord server, and
You're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
So, it's linked below if you want to go watch it, but fair warning, it's over an hour long. So, instead of watching the entire 72 minutes, I think, you could have me, the resident cognitive psychologist slash lobster daddy expert, show you the best parts.
2 hours later.
Everybody prioritizes something even if they might not know it. We agree based on your definitions. Moving on. Like, where's the debate here from his definitions? That... I win. I solved it. Where is the debate based on his definitions? This video made possible thanks to the continuing support of viewers, patrons, and PayPal pals like you. Thanks! Yeah, so Beautiful Bear in a Tutu shared it on my Discord, and there was a healthy discussion on the clip because it is...
You don't know where you are right now.
But then Samantha at SJHall76 on Blue Sky tagged me and like, okay, fine. Fine. So yeah, other than the, 2-minute, 3-minute clip, I haven't seen it yet, so we're going to watch it together, assuming you haven't watched it already. So before we start playing it, I have to say I'm curious why Peterson's doing this now. I have it on good authority that part of the conservative influencer playbook is to only do these sorts of things when you benefit from it. So I'm curious what the benefit is. And I haven't used Twitter for quite some time. And no, Toby, stay. Other than posting my little videos on it, I haven't used Twitter, so I don't know what Peterson's doing. I know he moved to Arizona to help Michaela with the Peterson Academy, and because Ontario was being big meanies about the college trying to take his license and everything. He just released the book. He did the whole book promo thing, the We Who Wrestle with God book. I don't know what he's got going on right now that this would be a beneficial thing for him to do. I've recorded a couple different attempts trying to get at the heart of the issue with this entire debate. Going back through everything, I think this clip from Peterson's second claim gets at that core issue. If all of these come down to him having this very specific definition that his claim is based on, and other people having different definitions because some of his definitions are weird, like God is your conscience, which seems highly specific to this context, how is a fruitful debate supposed to happen here? So keep an eye out for that as we go through this.
My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
I will say, for this atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting, that is very much his thing from 12 Rules and Beyond Order, that an atheist doesn't really understand themselves and they don't realize that even though they say they're an atheist, they act as if they believe in a God. This is very much his shtick.
My experience with atheists is twofold. Is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak.
Can't imagine they'll get to this, but I'd be interested to know what he means, what Peterson means by a reductive view of God, because I absolutely do not qualify for the second thing. I am not an atheist because I got burned by somebody religious at some point. We were holiday Christians. We never went to church except for like 2 times a year, and then eventually that even fell off, so it was not going. Nobody there even had an opportunity to interact with me, really. And it wasn't because of my parents, it just... I have a video, I never remember which corner, where I talk about why I'm an atheist, and it's none of that. I'm not an atheist because I deny the Christian God or Hindu structure of gods and goddesses or whatever else. It's just I don't see the evidence or necessity in the way my understanding of the universe works for there to be some sort of omnipotent, omniscient being that does stuff, and for us to have something that is outside the physical nature as we understand it that will carry on because of everything that I explained in the video. Like, to use one of the examples, if you have like a stroke or brain trauma that significantly alters your personality, what's that mean for your soul? Is your soul, it seems like your soul would have to be tied to whatever's happening organically, but then if you have just some nasty, nasty trauma in like the frontal lobe and you lose all of your impulse control and do shitty things, you're going to be held accountable for that, even though it's not necessarily your fault. That doesn't seem right.
Let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting?
How do you define you? How do you define me? How do you define God? Here we go.
The question, did that happen, begs the question, what do you mean by happen?
And it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant.
What? Oh, what?
I'm saying that we can't know, because we can't talk to those authors.
If you don't agree that Moses was the guy that Peterson's saying he is, then therefore you think he was a villain. Where is that coming from? What part of, I think it was Rule 7? Tell the truth or at least don't lie, I think. One of the 12 rules where to really understand an argument that somebody's making with you, you have to reframe it or re-say it in your own words to make sure you're understanding it and get clarification on it. Does he really think that was the argument? Is he that, I don't know, dense? Because he's saying it, and I would assume he tries to live by his rules as best as he can, but like, what?
God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said
Yeah.
I didn't say the.
Yeah, but it's fair to get pedantic on the or damn it. Also have pedantic sweaters if you want. It's fair to pin him down on the versus the, because he will flip between the versus the, where he's talking, oh, I'm talking broadly and I'm not making a specific thing, but then he moves on as if he was, and he's probably going to do the same thing here.
Not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming. That isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story.
Why is it necessary that the Jewish, because, you know, Moses, God, who is this thing that would just make our heads pop, is necessarily the same God that's experienced by other people? Because other traditions have God or gods that you can interact with and won't make your head explode through the sheer magnitude of the experience. So the difference in how these things are understood, what's the implication there? Is it, and like this guy, maybe it's the format, but I feel like he's not necessarily going on the attack here on Peterson's argument and sort of on the defensive. He sort of got at the differences, but like I think that's really critical for this point, because it's not just that atheists are rejecting the Christian God. Atheists are rejecting whatever divine space and facet of reality that's built in by these different religions. Right? Also, it's a really big claim to say that he knows that atheists don't understand what they're rejecting, but we don't. The atheists don't. Or the agnostics. Let's include them too. They so frequently get left behind. How does he know that we don't understand what we're rejecting?
That isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story. I mean, it's the same.
I took philosophy of science as my one philosophy class. And one of the things was with like hypothesis testing and uncertainty in scientific endeavors, where if you go out and you want to say that like crows are black, you look at a bunch of crows and they're all black. There exists the possibility that there is a non-black crow that you just don't know about. right? And, you know, like albinism is a thing in crows. So yeah, there are non-black crows, but generally crows are black. You know, just because his experience of atheists is that they don't understand what they're rejecting doesn't mean that precludes the possibility of atheists who do understand.
That you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable, and that you have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole.
Okay, so the final analysis is presumably when you die. Right? That's what he's getting at. That's what he's meaning here with the vagary. But that's assuming there is something there that you have to whatever, and that you are able to withstand its presence after you die, because that would be pretty fucked that you die, you go before God, and then you just like poof out of existence because you're not supposed to interact with it.
Okay, is there a problem with that?
I don't understand the question. Is there a problem with you being a thing that interacts with the thing that's beyond your experience in the final analysis, whatever that is intended to mean? Like, I know it's a joke to harp on Peterson with the what do you mean by the?
What do you mean do?
What does he mean?
I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Why do we have to establish a relationship with the infinite? That should be his question here, not like... I would absolutely not do well in these sort of situations because I do absolutely end up getting lost, not even at the tree level of the forest, but like the little tufts of grass and roots level, as evidenced by my different Peterson series, where I do get lost in the little dirt level of the forest looking. So the issue hinges on the necessity of us being finite, establishing a relationship with the infinite, right? That is the central issue here, because what is the infinite? Peterson could probably like waffle around with the style madness and not define it as God, basically, but that's what he's talking about here. Clearly, that's what he's talking about here, with the unknowable thing that in the final analysis you need to have a relationship with. But why? Where is he getting the idea that we need to establish a relationship with the infinite? And I guess this is sort of like what he was talking about in the last rule we covered. I think it was 8. Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible, where you need to have art in your life and you need to buy art, have an art in your life to establish a relationship with the divine beautiful. Beautiful divine, whichever. I would agree, Peterson problem again, I agree that yes, you need to have nice things that bring you joy in your life because life can suck and be terrible and hard, but I wouldn't necessarily categorize that as the beautiful divine. You can call it that if you want, but that doesn't make it true for everybody.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono.
I don't know anything about the Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting.
No, guy.
I'm not rejecting it. No more than I'm rejecting.
No, you're trying a gotcha and it's not going to work because it's not a good gotcha. I'm sorry. Because Peterson, I imagine, will rightly say that, you know, just because he doesn't know anything about it doesn't mean he's rejecting it.
I'll answer that question once you answer my question, which is, do I reject everything that I'm ignorant of? Because
That's a
that's
fair
your
question.
presupposition that undergirds your argument, and unless you can prove that that's valid, then there's no point.
No, David, that is a fair position for Peterson to have. That's not a good line of reasoning to approach this with.
Do you believe that Lono exists? Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer that question for the reasons I just described.
It's like he's went to the Ben Shapiro school of debate, where you try to force people into an answer that they don't necessarily agree with by forcing them to give like a categorical yes or no. And it's tempting to fall into like, okay, yeah, no, yes, whatever, but you don't have to answer in that way. It's not a multiple choice test. You can say like, I don't have enough information to give you an answer.
I would say that you're the one who doesn't understand what I'm saying, not the other way around. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way.
Do you think that there's an underlying unity of things?
I wish he'd follow through with the second thought of like, of that Greg would follow through with, because I feel like the point he was getting at is he's using atheism and the rejection of God in this one way, but not necessarily in the symbols or the other things that he was talking about. And I feel like Greg is a great person to talk to Peterson on this, and I'm going to speculate maybe he has a philosophy background, because there's just something about philosophy that I don't mesh with.
Scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you? Yes? No? Or that there are multiple competing truths? Those are the options.
Oh, Peterson, you should know better. You should know better. So, ideally, we would like science to operate under grand unifying whatevers, but we're not there yet. We're very much not there yet. So we have, especially in psychology, we have scattershot theories about many things, and in a lot of places there's contradicting theories. So like memory. There's single process, dual process theories for retrieval. I should really look into this and see what the state of it is. I can't imagine the debate's dead. When I was in grad school, it was still fiery, passionate divide between the single and dual process people. Dual process for memory, you have recognition and familiarity, and those are two separate processes. And familiarity is like a Gaussian normal distribution, where you can be incredibly familiar about something, moderately familiar, or like not at all familiar. But then recognition is binary. You either recognize it or you don't. So you have this nice normal distribution sort of thing for familiarity, where it's a range, and recognition is binary. You either do or you don't. And the idea is that you have both these memory systems in play when you're having to remember things or recognize things or whatever. Yeah, two systems. One system argues that it's all just one thing, one memory system, and the thing that the dual process people think is binary actually isn't. It's just when you get up into the very high, let's say, familiarity, you feel like you either are in that or you're not, but that is not the appropriate way to be thinking about this. And I heard tales of places like grad schools where you had people from both camps who would use the grad students against each other. Like, it was a mess because they're just fucking with each other because they cannot agree on how many memory systems there are. They want their theory to be the one that explains it, and they believe their theory is the one that explains it. But it, there's reason to think it could be either of them. And it sort of spills over into other things. Like some of what I did was implicit learning research. And again, is it sort of like a single process? Is it a dual process? And at a conference, a psychonomics once, I saw one of the dual process guys. Like, these guys are old. They were like 50s, 60s old. Come up to a poster by a single process guy, like made sure he saw and then walked off. Like, it is heated. So yes, ideally, science, we will have a grand unifying understanding of things, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet for probably anything. Even like physics, the starchiest, whitest lab coat science there is. There's hot debate on the nature of the universe, how particles work. Like, they're finding evidence that the current model of physics isn't complete. And what does that mean? What are the implications of that? What's missing? And this is still going on. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And if we still have a planet to live on, we'll continue, I'm sure. So Peterson's doing a sneaky and trying to say that science is operating in one thing and not the other thing, when really it's both. Because again, he's doing the two box thing that he always fucking does, where it's either this box or this box, completely ignoring that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, and science isn't.
In physics, people are looking for the theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
Physics!
It's interesting, it's helpful.
Oh no.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
Okay, but just because physicists believe that there should be a way to explain everything from the itty bitty teeny tiny to the macroscopic, like, universe scale, because that's part of the grand unifying theory of everything, grand unifying theory stuff. It's like guts. It's physicists and their acronyms. They want there to be a unifying theory because the math, like you want your math to be clean, basically. And so if you have the ability to explain how things are working at like the quantum level and the universe level, elegant. Physicists love their elegance. Scientists try to, over in psychology land, over where we're eating dirt. We're trying. The math just isn't as clean and elegant. They're not doing this because they believe they're going to unlock God in doing this and unlock the unity of everything. This will reveal something else, if that's what Peterson's getting at, because you can never know with him.
Material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles.
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Here's a quick heuristic on how much you should be listening to any given physicist. If they start telling you that they can explain consciousness, pump the brakes. They're outside their lane. Yes, physics takes mastery of a lot of really hard math and physics. That doesn't make them an expert on everything else. Maybe thousands of years in the future, we'll have the quantum to the universe thing figured out in such a way that we can explain how brains lead to the conscious experience of the world, in which case, sure, a physicist can explain imagination. But until we get there, no.
I think you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
I'm not.
Yes.
Okay.
I asked
All right.
you a very specific question. What is it that you think guides you when you're talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Okay, so I guess in Peterson's head, this is connected because 12 rules logic, the things that cause you to act in a certain way and act by your moral and ethical principles is the same thing that is guiding the good and the bad, which some might call God, and we act as if it is God, so it may as well be God. So to him, it's connected, but to everybody else here, and operating in reality, not in lobster land, it's not connected.
So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within.
Okay.
That's a definition.
Okay, so what does it mean that people have different definitions of that? What's that mean? Because, sure, cool, Elijah defined it in this way. As the little voice telling you what's good and what's bad. And? Because I feel like then his logic from 12 Rules is because atheists don't just amorally operate, that means they're listening to that little voice, which means they're listening to God. Gotcha, atheists, you're not atheists. It's because he's rejecting... God, you were so close, Greg. Rejecting our understanding of what atheism means and our use of it and the implications of it. And it's bullshit that Peterson comes in to say, like, oh, there's no atheists because they don't act like it. Like,
By that definition of God,
I'm not defining it. Elijah defined
Okay, so
it.
as Elijah defines
It's
God.
defined that way in Jonah, too.
Okay, so as
Cardinal
Cool.
Newman also
Got
defined
it.
it that
As
way.
it-
Just pointing out to you
Got
how
it.
God is defined in the Old
okay,
Testament.
all right.
hey, people who know this stuff, how many different ways was God defined in the Old Testament? And what does that mean, Peterson? What does it mean that there's so many different definitions? So because there's so many different definitions, what does that mean? What are the implications of that, Peterson? If he's going to argue that atheists, to be considered atheists, need to reject anything and all of that, why? Why? Why is that necessary?
The
I'm
Mona
defining
Lisa.
God as conscience.
Okay, so we're defining God as conscience. Why? Is that the same thing as the untangible thing that you must have a relationship with in the final analysis? I guess that could work. But then what does that even mean for being religious? Peterson is defining God as conscience. Is he always going to define it as such? Or is it only for this particular argument that atheists don't understand what they're rejecting? That is an important question. They need a Peterson expert here. So if God is just the conscience, that's all he is. We need to have an art in our life to have a relationship with our conscience, and that is going to sustain us against the hardship of life. That doesn't work. It's interesting that Greg got him to actually give a specific thing, and they have like 2 minutes left of the little chess timer, and Greg's on the defensive, so I don't know if he's going to be able to really get him to defend his position of like, okay, if why God is conscience, by that definition, sure, atheists aren't rejecting God, but that's just being cute with words, which is very much on Peterson's brand.
It's not relevant to the context with which I am using the term God.
It's directly relevant. Atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. You accept conscience as a guide, and conscience is one of the defining characteristics of God in the Old Testament.
Oh, look at Top Lobster Peterson coming in with the assertive aggression, because let us not forget that men can be aggressive with each other and understand and can be civil with each other because there's the underlying threat of violence.
We talk, we argue, we push, and then it becomes physical. Right? Like if we move beyond the boundaries of civil discourse, we know what the next step is. Okay, that's forbidden in discourse with women.
He is harnessing that so hard right now. It's kind of funny when you can see it for what it is. It's disturbing, but it's kind of funny.
I think you're being intellectually disingenuous.
In what way?
You understand the way I am using the term God and belief.
Not in the least. I don't understand how you're using it in the least. That's why I'm
yes,
trying
you
to
do,
define
Peterson. He fucking spelled it out so clearly when he was talking about the different definitions of, like, atheism. He spelled it out so fucking clearly. Were you not listening?
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
Why should they be? What does that even mean, Pearson? Why should they be? Is this trying to get at the postmodern thing again of it, morality and purpose being relative? But him going, nuh-uh, there is a fundamental reality and a fundamental purpose that he understands, and he's trying to get people to understand because he is the ultimate knower of things. Science isn't necessarily proscriptive in this way, which he very much is. Could be, okay, just on the face of this, it can be found in science because people do study morality and purpose. He probably has fucking papers on this. So by that definition, it's found in science. From different research that's being done on the various things, we can understand morality, where it's coming from, the different environmental properties that give rise to different morality systems, or why different people have different purposes in life, suggestions for if you're feeling lost and without purpose, things you might try to find your purpose. But science shouldn't be proscriptive in this way. I want to skip this point because I'm just going to be yelling.
We have examples of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness, right? If you give chimpanzees...
You can go beyond chimpanzees. One of my 12 Rules videos is actually copyright claimed because I showed the full clip of a monkey experiencing outrage. That a lack of fairness. Fairness. Where neighbor... Were they macaque? I don't remember what type of monkey. Neighbor monkey is getting like the good treats and he's getting the bullshit ones. And he gets mad. So mad because this is an injustice. Like, they get it. I mean, freaking cats get it.
So morality is intrinsic.
I think...
So it precedes science.
I think that...
What even is the essence of his claim? What is the point of this claim? Okay, so if it's 25 atheists versus a Christian, I guess the point would be that a Christian is able to say where morality and purpose are coming from when science can't. Therefore, checkmate atheists, Christianity has the edge on morality and purpose. Okay, but I guess going at what they're talking about, Brian, with it being something natural, that would take it a step before Christianity, where just organisms, social organisms, have a sense of morality and purpose. And so the Christianity is just set dressing for those. Right?
Science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
Science has to exist in a moral framework that is itself not scientific. I fucking hate philosophy. And I think some of the horrors of World War II would counter that. No, it doesn't. We like to keep science on the moral up and up because really bad things happen if we don't. Like, the US doesn't have clean hands here. Like the Tuskegee syphilis study, where a bunch of people, even after, so it started before the antibiotics for syphilis were rolled out, found even, I think. So just looking at how syphilis spreads in a population, basically, very cruel. But then, and very cruel in part because the participants didn't know that they were in a study. They weren't told. And so after an antibiotic treatment came out for syphilis, and these people could have been treated, they weren't. It's worth noting that this population was black. There's no morality there. There isn't.
Science doesn't explain morality.
It doesn't explain how social...
Science, okay, that is a different claim. That is an absolutely different claim, that science cannot explain morality. Because he did. I'm going to assume Brian's not going to be able to launch really into the specifics of like the population benefits of moral or altruistic members in whatever little social group on propagating the species, potentially at their own expense. Like, we can't explain where morality came from in that regard, Peterson. You should know this.
Animals would need to be...
Well, that's a complicated question.
We see it, though.
Yeah, but explaining the evolution of morality and explaining morality itself aren't the same thing.
And we're getting cute with the words again. Explaining the evolution of morality and explaining morality aren't the same thing. Why? How else can we explain morality, Peterson, other than saying the benefits or costs associated with morality or moralistic acting organisms? How else can we science this question? What is he wanting science to do here?
I think that your claim is really being framed to be morality and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing
Thank you, Luke.
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose, yes.
Thank you, Luke, but oh God, Peterson.
Science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's why we define science as value-free.
Okay, what does he mean by value? Because value has many different definitions. Is he talking about like the hierarchy of values value? Or is he talking about like the outputs value? He must be talking about the hierarchy of values value because that's what he means usually by value. But except for when he flips the definition, because he fucking does that all the time.
That has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value-predicated act.
This seems like a child argument of the first one, because now he's saying that scientists are acting as if they have morals and purpose, when they shouldn't be, because his working definition of value is where you spend your time and put your attention. Therefore, something God, I don't know.
What I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay.
Why the fuck would you come on this thing? See, this was one of the debate that we had on my Discord server, where I tried to, like, devil's advocate or whatever here. This is being sold as, I only have a little download of it. Let's see if I can find it again. What is Jubilee calling it? And is this what Peterson thought he was signing up for? Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. Where did I get 25? They said 25, right?
And today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists.
Okay, so if this was originally 1 Christian versus 20 atheists, because I'm pretty sure that's why I downloaded it as, to Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. And to be fair, on Jubilee's side here, it is common practice to change the title and or thumbnail after a day, a couple hours, whatever, to try to get new traffic. Or like, okay, maybe you didn't click on it the first time, but now with this new title, we'll do something else. I'd be curious to know what Jordan Peterson thought he was signing up for here. If it was just, hey, we'd love to have you debate 20 atheists, or hey, we want you as a Christian to whatever. Because he keeps getting real about, oh, I don't know, am I a Christian? People debate that, when it's like, I imagine the casting call probably name drop Peterson. I would imagine it would probably be Jordan Peterson, Christian versus atheists, and maybe even the inference could be made that they have atheists, and so they're going to be debating somebody as a religious position.
First, let me give you a little behind the scenes of what happened in order to make this debate actually happen. Wow, wouldn't it be a good idea if it was a doctor versus anti-vaxxer? So I had Sam shoot them an email and recommend the idea for an episode and actually volunteer to be the one in the middle. They loved the idea. The participants didn't even know I was coming, so that was completely news to them.
I'm going to do my best to edit the full public version down as much as I can. My goal, less than an hour for the final finish thing, or finalist, if you will. We'll see how that goes. But if you would like to know what this Peterson expert has to say, in particular giving a lot of extra context for where Peterson's arguments are coming from based on his life advice books, then head over to my Patreon or channel membership, where you will be able to get the long version with all of that extra context and me yelling at the laptop. Kitty.
I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to.
I've seen some people, like Genetically Modified Skeptic, point out this opening move as really cool and in the spirit of debate, but honestly, some of the worst debate or conversations I've had opened with things like this, because it almost immediately was followed by the other person just unloading the weirdest bullshit on me and expecting me to just take it and roll with it because we had agreed to just honor and respect everything coming from the other side. So, yeah.
If you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
What are you defining it, Peterson? You're the one with the claim here. Nail it down. I would think a basic rule of debate is you have to be clear about your terms and not like this flitting about things and being cute with language. And I keep saying that because he fucking is.
So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting, because I would say by definition...
By your definition.
God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's a definition.
That's your definition. Like, if all of these come down to him having this very specific definition that his claim is based on, and other people having different definitions because some of his definitions are weird, like God is your conscience, which seems highly specific to this context, how is a fruitful debate supposed to happen here? And I'm sorry, Max's face is going to be out of frame now.
If there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward, self-sacrifice so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
I don't know if I have many Christians, but if you want to chime in, is that the purpose of life? Legitimately asking.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So
No,
when you,
not, well,
yes,
let's
they
define,
did. Yes, they did.
Hang on.
Let's define benefit.
Like, if I did something for your sister.
You're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
what typical Christians?
And then Peterson can straight back with like, oh, well, my experience of Christians is Y. You have X, I have Y. Like, we're talking around each other.
How about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
What do you mean, believe?
It's good to have definitions down in a debate, but like, what do you mean by believe?
If you believe something, you stake your life on it.
God, he is so fucking transparent with like the way he speaks to people and the body language. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a very overt thing for him, where it's like, I don't like this guy. I'm going to dominate him now. And so I'm going to be very precise in how I speak to him. And there's going to be an aggressive posturing because I am the top lobster here. And I'm going to melt his brain into the submissive lobster that he is. It's so transparent.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it, and you die for it. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Do recall, dear viewer, that one of his arguments repeatedly, 12 Rules and Beyond Order, is in the hierarchy of religious structures, polytheistic religions are lower on the belief hierarchy than monotheistic ones. And monotheistic ones have achieved that unity that makes you an unstoppable force. And if you don't have that, you are fragmented. And this also loops back to Jung, where you need to organize all of your different, oh God, what are they called? Fragments of your personality, whatever they're called, I don't remember. And if you do that, you are a unified whole. Great. And if you haven't yet, you are subject to the various whims of those personalities within you.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
how would you define belief?
Hey, Peterson, do you believe the Earth is round? Would you die for it? Although we're gonna fucking die for it. I believe in vaccines. I don't have a choice. We're gonna die for it.
But if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life.
Don't be so sure.
I mean, it's the thing where like, yeah, Peterson would say he would die for that because he's a man of his principles or whatever, but like, I have a different moral system than Peterson, chaotic good. And yeah, no. If somebody, is this pen fake or is it real? Like, can you give me more context? Because I'd like my brain's not blown out. I'd like to survive. I can deal with some fragments of my moral integrity missing if I get to live another day. Some things, yes, I would die for. I'm not gonna say it because some parts of the internet are weird. But this all or nothing mentality of his.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that. My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
Oh, God.
So I want to start off with like defining terms. How do you define worship?
Prioritize.
Okay, but why are you defining worship in this way, and why is this a valid definition? And okay, so the issue here is, again, with the value hierarchy like being expanded out beyond what it should be. That's what he's doing here. Worship is just prioritizing. What is that bias? What's the point of that? Like, yes, atheists prioritize things. Fuck. It seems like the core issue for me here is with his definitions, right? So, like, okay, if we're defining worship as prioritizing and God as conscience, okay, yeah. Everybody prioritizes something even if they might not know it. We agree based on your definitions. Moving on. Like, where's the debate here from his definitions? That... I win. I solved it. Where is the debate based on his definitions? And that's why this is a shit show, because his definitions are, I don't know, milquetoast enough that, like, okay, yeah, everybody prioritizes things. Okay. And?
It's like having a preference over something rather than the other.
It's a hierarchy of preferences.
Yeah.
And you use it to direct
Hierarchy.
your attention.
Right.
So whatever you're attending to, you're worshiping.
Okay, so from that definition, most atheists would probably agree with you, although they probably also have an issue with the language framing. Cool, so... Oh god. I almost... Like, why is he doing this? What's the point?
Become a little bit familiar with your idea of like this value-laden hierarchy.
Yeah.
You kind of posit that at the bottom of this hierarchy, or you call it top or bottom, I suppose.
Right.
At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
Well, that'd be the top of the hierarchy.
Do you believe that something can be good, like stance independently? Something that can be good?
I don't know what you mean by stance independent.
Okay, so
you mean independent of people?
Independent of people. We can use that.
No. Independent people, or independent of organisms making a decision, I don't think there is a good. The universe doesn't care.
So what makes someone a Christian and what makes someone not a Christian? What makes, like that's what I'm trying to figure out. Because
That's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah, well, probably the deepest answer to that is willingness to shoulder your cross voluntarily and trust.
I think a lot of Christians would have issue with that. I think the early Christians would have issue with that. Because, again, he's defining things in a way that is uniquely him. Because I've shouldered many burdens in my day, in spite of the suffering it's provoked. And I guess he would call me a Christian. He says I'm not an atheist, so I guess I get to be a Christian in his operation too. But, like, that's such a weird definition of Christian. Why define it in that way? Other than to try to do some hand-waving to get people into, like, oh, well, if you accept that you are a Christian in my definitions, perhaps you should investigate further. Why not check out We Who Wrestle with God to learn more? Come into the fold, little one, dear one. Join us.
Can you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Do Catholics attend to Mary?
Alright, so this next part involves who I'm calling Debate Bro number 2. The series of questions and Peterson's answers is important for understanding the clickbaity clip that gets shown here, but this entire process takes a bit, and anything over 10 seconds really, and I'm running the risk of getting claimed on the whole video. So we're gonna have to adapt our approach. What this means is you're gonna get me doing this. Question: do Catholics attend to Mary? Well, yes. Do they fit Peterson's definition of worship? Yes. So then, if they attend to Mary, that means they're worshiping Mary, right? Well, they might not put her in the highest place. But you would put it that way. No. But you just said it. Are you taking it back now? There's still a hierarchy. Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within that hierarchy, there's something at the top. Alright, you can worship things below. Mary's quite a ways up the hierarchy, but not at the top. I want to know if this guy knows Peterson well, or like his shtick well, because to me it was clear he wasn't saying that Mary was at the tippy top of the hierarchy, but you know, she is prioritized up there, and it was incomplete from his statements that God was necessarily in the ranking here.
How do they regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a Christian or you're not.
I won't talk to you if you're a smartass.
Oh my god, these debate bros coming in hot, trying to get him with the gotcha, and it's like, to use Peterson's fucking jargon, they're off aim. They're sinning. They're missing the mark. No. You're coming in with all sorts of assumptions and presuppositions and trying to catch him in his own logic, and it's not working because it wasn't part of the original line of questioning. It was outside of whatever. It wasn't something that was explicit in what he said. Like, it's not working. Stop trying to do the Ben Shapiro stupid shit.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
Danny might have given us a really important clue here for what the atheists thought this was going to be from the casting posting. That was going to be 20 or 25, whatever number. Oh my god, Jubilee, get your shit straight. 25, 20 atheists debating a Christian, not necessarily Jordan Peterson, just some Christian. And this tracks for what Dr. Mike said of his experience, where they didn't know it was going to be him, necessarily, the anti-vaxxers who they'd be debating, presumably like a doctor or somebody who'd be able to try to defend vaccines. So if it is the case that the atheists were brought on board with the understanding they would be debating a Christian, it's easy to see how Peterson refusing to commit to that sort of label is confusing and frustrating in the debate process.
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
The title of the YouTube channel is Jubilee. What the fuck does that tell me?
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right, you're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
Yeah. I'm kind of embarrassed for that guy. I feel like you can spot an insufferable debate bro coming, because there's just a vibe to them that's different from the other people. Especially 66, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, who, had a good 10 minutes with Peterson because she was legitimately engaging with him.
I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street, right?
Probably.
Are you saying I worship my wife?
I'm trying to define worship.
So prioritize and sacrifice. I do
the
those
higher
things.
it is in the hierarchy, the more what you're doing is akin to worship.
Okay, so the thing with this is Peterson has more clearly spelled this out in 12 rules, and I understand in a debate you need to talk about what's in the exchange of the debate, but I feel like a lot of opportunities are being missed here because this is something that he talks about in 12 rules and Beyond Order, like the hierarchy of value. And yeah, you sacrifice more for people you know and your loved ones than you do for random people on the street. But whichever thumbnail I had, Moses? No. Yes? Whoever. No, it wasn't Moses. Oh my god, Abraham almost killing his son in sacrifice with the flower because YouTube, that you need to sacrifice that which you love most. Presumably to the greater good or the highest power or the greatest value, whatever. So this is something that's laid out in his stuff. And it's kind of beside the point of his claim here that atheists worship something even if they don't know it. Right? Because again, going back to the thing I said at the start of this rule, if he's going to define worship in this way, I don't think atheists would disagree other than with the label. And then where's the debate?
Why do you value your wife? You do value your wife.
I love her, so I prioritize and I sacrifice for her.
Right. So that's within the confines of love, let's say.
Sure.
And under his definition, yes, you worship your wife. We're debating about there's no debate here. It's not even that we're debating about the wrong thing, it's that there isn't a debate here because of the way he's defining things. How is this an hour and a half?
The way that you attend to your wife is dependent on your ultimate aims, even if you don't know it.
Okay. This is bordering on a deepity, where it's just fancily stating something pretty obvious that, yeah, people act differently depending on what their goals are, even if they don't realize they are. And?
When is it worship as opposed to just, I love my wife?
The closer you get to the top or the bottom, the more it's more like
how
worship.
close to the top? Because I don't think I worship anything. And if you're saying I have to hit a certain threshold for it to be worship, it is possible I don't worship anything then, right?
No, because under his definition, you prioritizing or paying attention to things is worship. Can we move on?
What do you mean worship? I told you what I meant. What do you mean?
So I mean,
That's fair.
something you worship is something that you have a reverential view for in a manner in which you believe it to be above and beyond normal things you like.
So in this guy's definition, he does not worship his wife because she isn't above and beyond normal things. Like, she's part of the normal things.
So do you have that attitude towards your wife?
I have that attitude.
Do you privilege her compared to other women?
Of course I privilege her compared to other women, but I don't worship her. Nor does she worship me.
By the definition you just offered, yes,
it's not Peterson. It's not Peterson. Everybody's going for gotchas, I swear to God. He very explicitly said, like, above normal stuff, right? And so I was able to understand that, to delineate between, like, God or other things that we would worship in a religious manner versus the love and affection that he gives his wife, which is more than he gives other women, presumably.
You're making the assumption that only the thing at the top has anything to do with worship, and I'm saying that's not true. It's a hierarchy of prioritization. There's either something at the top or you're fragmented and confused. Those are the only options.
2 boxes. Once again, you either worship things, which means give attention and priority to, but sometimes slip in the Jesus, or you're a fragmented mess who is rudderless and without aim. You act by God, which is your conscience, or you don't. But, you know, God can mean your conscience. It can mean other things. It might not. It might, depending on the argument we're doing, if we're going for a gotcha or not. Or you're an ununified mess of a person. 2 boxes. That's it.
You're going in many directions.
Okay.
Or you're going in one direction.
So let's suppose I'm fragmented and confused. Then you agree I don't worship anything.
No, then you worship multiple things.
So what's the threshold when it's worship?
Because again, you either worship one God, or if you worship multiple gods, you're conflicted and undivided, or divided and blah, 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 blah.
Depth of worship is analogous to depth of literary significance. And the closer you get to what's deep, the more religious and worshipful your practice.
So to use your analogy then, how deep do I have to go for it to be worship? Do I have to be Catcher in the Rye? Do I have to be War and Peace? Or
depends on what you're seeking for.
Oh, depends on what you're seeking for? Does that mean it's relative, Peterson? That maybe there's different value based on different contexts that maybe we could extend to value in people's life and priorities and aim and God in people's life being relative based on the context of which they're trying to whatever?
So I have to worship something to have a meaningful life. And if
There's no difference between those 2 things.
Okay.
They're the same thing.
So if I don't worship anything, my life will not be meaningful, correct?
Well, that's the definition of nihilism.
Okay.
We're defining nihilism now. Definition of nihilism is not having meaning? Is that what it was? I have to show you this picture. It's funny. Belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. True nihilist. This is from Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. True nihilists would believe in nothing, have no loyalties, and no purpose other than perhaps an impulse to destroy. Perhaps. Kinda.
So if I'm a nihilist, I don't worship anything.
That's true, and then you...
okay. You just said everybody worships something. I think you've just agreed there is a class of people that doesn't.
Well,
fair.
They're incoherent in their worship, and hand gestures like that aren't going to help.
He gotcha. I'll admit, he gotcha. First gotcha of the night. Almost an hour in.
But there's happy nihilists.
How do
you explain that there are happy nihilists then?
Because
Well,
you just said they
the
can't
mere
be.
fact that you state that there are happy nihilists doesn't make it true. Like, what's your evidence that, how do you measure nihilism and how have you associated?
And yet Peterson is willing to completely die on the hill of atheists being this and atheists being that because of the atheists he's interacted with. Because he is the decider and the knower.
What's your definition of happiness? And
Oh,
have you
God.
compared them to religious people? Because if you do, by the way, it's clearly the case that religious people over the long run have better mental health. It's a well-documented fact.
Correlation is not causation. Right? And sure, okay, don't make me do research for this video. Let's just work with the idea that religious people tend to be happier than non-religious people. Why would that be? The simple argument, which I think Peterson's going with here, is that the religiosity, is causing the happiness. But it's possible that people who are religious differ in fundamental ways from the non-religious. Like, maybe if a person is non-religious, they tend to be more critical of institutions and hierarchies and tradition than the religious folks. And as such, we are full of institutions and hierarchies that cause suffering. There's reason to be unhappy, but if you're able to just ignore that because, you know, Sky Daddy told you to or whatever, I know that's reductive, I'm sorry. Of course, the religious person's going to be happier, but it's not because of the religious belief, right?
My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories.
Okay, so we know Peterson puts a lot of weight and emphasis on stories as illustrating universal truths that have been revealed and worked over time by our ancestors, our wise ancestors, and so we need to figure out the truth contained in those stories to understand everything. And cool story. Okay, atheists accept Christian morality. See, I want to get really into the weeds and argue about this because it's not necessarily that I accept, and what do you mean by accept, Christian morality so much as there is a lot of overlap between my morality and the Christian morality. Okay, there's some overlap between my morality and these religions' morality. Then I can still be an atheist. Oh, I guess on this point he's not necessarily saying that atheists are an atheist. In the statement alone, what does denying the religion's foundational stories have to do with anything? We know from the broader Peterson context, that's where the books are, that the stories are reflective of the morality, instructive, proscriptive about the morality, and so for him, his framework, they're related. Okay. We'll have to see what directions he takes us, because I imagine this is going to have to go to some Jung archetype, collective unconscious sort of thing of what the stories are indicating and how that has informed atheist whatever. Denying the religion's foundational stories. Like, I guess the thing for me here is how literal we're talking about those stories. But it seems like a non sequitur. Like, why does the second part follow from the first part, necessarily?
What does it mean to accept Christian values precisely? Or Christian morality?
Thank you, Liam.
It means to aim up as hard as you can, no matter what happens to you.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Atheists try to aim up, which we've fully unpacked. Like, it's sort of similar to the worship thing of where you're putting your attention, where you value your priorities, and you want to aim that at the highest good, blah, 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 blah. Fine. Atheists generally try to do good. And I guess that means, for me, the critical thing is in the second part. What is the relevance of denying its foundational stories? What does that mean? What are the implications? Is this going to be another, okay, under your definitions, sure, atheists accept the foundational stories by their actions or whatever. And? So what?
If there are other theologies and disciplines that have similar types of values, how then is that definition mean? Like, wouldn't those also be Christian values under your definition?
I mean, human beings all over the world have come up with moral systems that fit roughly into a pattern, and they're very usefully studied.
Studied with what, Peterson? So I imagine the point he's building to is something about the fact that humans separately came up with similar morality systems indicates a fundamental truth about the morality of being with a capital B. I would disagree. We're a species. We have a lot of cultural differences that, environmental factors that are different, but we're the same squishy things. We're wired the same. Because of that, we're generally playing by the same game rules, to use Peterson's framing of things. Of course, we sort of develop the same morality systems, because it tends to work for our species under the conditions we've been in. Although in a super scarce environment, who's to say? With different environmental pressures, one might say, morality might drastically change. Hopefully not in my lifetime. But again, I guess sitting here talking through it, it's the second part that we really need to be focusing in on here. Liam, please. Please.
I learned a lot about Christianity by studying Taoism, for example, a lot. So I think you can make a case that Christianity formalized the landscape of good and evil more comprehensively and in more detail than any other religious system.
Why? Why? Especially compared to Judaism? Especially as they continued to change after the Christ happened? Especially, I was going to say something about all the canon fan fiction, like Milton, Paradise Lost, or Dante's Inferno, or I guess Divine Trilogy, that fleshed out things a lot, especially on the Satan-y end. Peterson would probably gesture at the collective unconscious, archetypal, whatever, being revealed through these other stories that were critically informed by the Christian tradition, and so therefore reflecting some fundamental truth about good and evil or something, whatever. But again, not that you necessarily are able to provide citations in a debate, but if he's going to go on the attack against people like talking about happy nihilists, about Christianity being top lobster in spelling out good and evil. It's like, sure, Christians did the best at defining Christian morality. Go figure.
And then I think that that's part of the reason that it defeated paganism and spread so broadly across.
Hey, Rag. What do you think about Christianity defeating paganism? Thoughts?
The West and is still dominant. Still understructures our culture, for example.
It's dominant, and it was able to ascend the dominance hierarchy, therefore is the bestest and most true.
The way you feel about Horus or Taoism or something is how I feel about Christian morals, I think.
Yeah, but how do I feel about it?
Well, that you took inspiration from them, you learned from them. Maybe
that's a good start,
right.
Because I would say that actually constitutes belief.
That's a good start, because the point of this debate is to bring you around to my perspective.
And so if you take inspiration from Christian ideas, then insofar as you do that, you are in fact a believer, which was my point with regards to atheists.
Correct.
Not understanding.
But have
what
you
they're
taken
projecting.
inspiration from Taoism?
Oregon doing stupid shit with the words. Checkmate atheists. What even is the point of this rhetorical gesture, I guess? Rhetoric? Am I in the right class? That atheists, in his definition and use of words, are believers of Christianity because they took inspiration from it. Once again, okay, cool, under your definition and framing of things, fine. And? What is this buying us?
So then you believe them under that definition?
Yeah, but I've incorporated them into something I think that's more comprehensive.
Okay, so if he's allowed to incorporate other things into something more comprehensive, why aren't atheists allowed to incorporate things into something more comprehensive for him and for them? I imagine this is going to be like the stuff about the hierarchy of value and what you're worshiping and your belief and all of that stuff, indicating something other than what you say or what you think.
Because a lot of my issues with Christianity have to do with the base morality of it, specifically with the idea of like the rapture and that concept of heaven and hell. I don't really agree with that morality. But if you could explain that to me and how I do agree with that, I would love to like hear.
I was going to complain about her focusing on the first half and not the second half, but that is an interesting point.
That isn't something I concern myself with, and that's more of a sectarian belief than something that's central to Christianity.
Not something I concern myself with. He's such a wordsmith. Because it's like dodging his belief in it. Which, you know, fair, I guess. We're not entitled to his beliefs. But it still gives him the wiggle room when he's talking to evangelicals who do believe in the rapture. They're like, oh no, I never said I don't believe. I'd like to think that if it were to happen, I would be raptured by the way I've lived my life.
Sin is what puts you in hell, right? And so then you might ask, well, how do you know you're in hell? How about you do anything to get out of it?
Okay, except there's the metaphorical hell he's talking about here, and then there's like the literal hell that is preached about and used to keep people in line under the different Christian belief systems that use that as a manipulation tactic. You know, if you wrong think, God knows, you're going to hell. You're a boy thinking about smooching other boys? You best not. And granted, like the Mormons, okay, they're not supposed to be called Mormons anymore. What are they supposed to be called? LDSers? They got some wiggle room there with it's not the thoughts, it's the acts. So, you know, you can wrong think about smooching those boys, but you better not act on it. Yeah, it's tricky, and I wish we would focus on the second half, because he's talking about a metaphorical hell, but that's not necessarily the belief for most Christians. Like, yeah, there's suffering on earth because of your misdeeds, missing the mark, but I think most people in that belief structure are concerned with the literal hell, that they're told their soul will spend eternity in roasting for whatever they did in life. And so that's kind of an important thing, and I guess Peterson would probably go into the stories aspect of that being used to encourage the right behavior while you're alive. I don't know.
Is sin like a part of Christian morality?
Then the consequence of that will be your life will be ridden with anxiety, your life will be pointless, people will turn against you.
Don't believe in sin at all.
What, do you believe in error?
Because my definition of sin is you erring and you suffering as a result. So if, I don't know if he's going to, let's see how good I am at this. Because he could make the argument, do you think that you will experience negative consequences if you act poorly? And then, of course, she'd probably say, yeah. Then you believe in sin. Even if you don't accept that you do, you are acting as if you believe in sin.
Have you made any mistakes?
What if I believe that the mistakes that you make, that they're fixable, and so that no sin is finite, and that the idea
that's a Christian belief.
There's a Christian belief that hell does exist, and if I commit sin, I'm going to go there, correct?
Yes.
So what if I don't believe in that? Like, I think...
I'm not there. I don't know if I'd be able to think this way if I was under the pressure, but I don't know. It's like he's going to be able to get out of this because of everything that we've talked about going into this.
Do you believe that you can change?
I do.
Do you believe you can change for the better?
I do.
Do you believe that when you change for the better, you abandon?
So granted, it's not necessarily part of his claim here of the eternal hell that's debatably, arguably, I don't know, in the Christian faith. That's not part of his claim, to be fair.
And you believe that you have agency in that. Yeah, those are all Christian presuppositions.
I guess maybe we have different opinions of what Christian morality is.
Yes, sounds
so
like
I think
it.
that my
I would be interested to know how he would respond to a debate bro woman. If he would still have that angry posturing that he does with the debate bro guys. Because of that, you know, threat of physical violence underlying all male interactions.
When men are talking to each other in any serious manner, that underlying threat of physicality is always there, especially if it's a real conversation, and it keeps the thing civilized to some degree. I'm defenseless against that kind of female insanity.
Because, you know, the women here, I'm presuming women, have taken a very different tact than the debate bro guys. And so he's responding differently.
If you want to atone, which means to unify yourself and unify that with the world.
Okay, so atoning is part of the unity process based on the hand signal.
Then the first thing you have to do is figure out what you did wrong and admit it. That's a confession. That was good.
My claim is Jordan Peterson's framework for understanding Christianity is probably not the one that the Bible intended us to use.
Fair.
A few minutes later.
So one of the things I look at is the impact of what I'm doing. I know a lot of evangelical Christians, and they've told me, like many of them, that they found my interpretations very helpful.
So he's doing the thing that he criticized other people for, right? Of the happy nihilists or whatever. Like, okay, so you heard positively from the people who agreed with you and found benefit from you. I don't think it's necessarily a stretch of the imagination that those that didn't find value didn't tell him or didn't talk to him. But I know that at least some have at least publicly written things or videos or whatever saying that he's off base. I want to say he was Catholic something. Reviewed We Who Wrestle with God, Peterson's Bible book, saying that, you know, his interpretations of everything is just so off the mark that, like, what is he even doing? So, yeah, sampling error.
And I've also talked to thousands of people who've told me that they came to understand the foundational stories of their culture better as a consequence of listening to me, and that they did everything they could to sort out their lives and that it worked.
Okay, cool. So that's not necessarily addressing her argument or her claim here. What was the intention of the Bible? And for convenience, we're going to talk about the New Testament. Presumably, those stories were written down by the early Christians because it was supposed to be sort of like a document about the life of their prophet, right? So those are supposed to be literal. He literally brought Lazarus back from the dead. He literally cured people's blindness or leprosy or whatever else. He literally was tempted by Satan in the desert. He was literally crucified, which, yeah, lots of people were. So for him to pull meaning from that, would that be against the intention of those authors?
I want to make a claim on whether this evidence is enough, right, to substantiate whether or not your interpretation is going to, you know, be more plausible, right, be the most plausible.
Meta issue is if intention of the authors matter at this point, or why the author's intention would matter. What do you mean by do?
What do you mean do?
Because, okay, originally, let's say it was supposed to be like a historical testimony of the prophet that, you know, was before their time, but they found meaning in or whatever. If that was their intention, it has, like, the authors are dead. Very dead. So it being used in a way not in accordance with their intention, does it matter? Let's say you had an L. Ron Hubbard who wasn't skeezy and trying to invent a religion whole cloth and wrote a book that people ended up spinning into a faith. I would say that would be bad. I was going to say, would that be bad? But what do you do with that? Does it matter?
belief in God as someone who resurrected or as someone who died for our sins is important. We can interpret that as just you have to believe that God is a symbol of sacrifice. That is different from believing that there was an actual person named Jesus Christ who died on the cross for our sins. True. So if you believe one and not the other, that can be the difference between you going to hell and you going to heaven.
Okay, I see. So for the purposes of this, the intention matters because of the potential of you going against the divine intent of what was written and you experiencing consequences for that.
How do we know what we are meant to believe, what the Bible intended for us to believe? And this can be very, very important to like our fate. You know
I've got no disagreement with any of that. What sort of response do you want from that? You pushed me beyond the limits of my knowledge.
I wonder if she's going to push him on this. So I think the thing she might be building to, if she gets a chance, is what if his interpretation or framework for understanding Christianity leads people astray from the intended divine meaning of things? And as an atheist, it's all irrelevant. In my belief system, there is no God to mete out punishment for interpreting things wrong. Easy. But for somebody who believes, arguably based on his actions, he believes that there is an omnipotent being who will judge things in the final analysis. So from his interpretation of things, it seems possible that God might not want things interpreted in this Jungian archetypal metaphorical story sense, and he's leading people astray. He's being heretical himself.
I know that the biblical stories are the foundation of Western culture. I know that the consequence of those stories has been the genesis of a society that is in the main freer and more abundant than any societies have ever been.
And also, correlation is not causation. Just because the Christians, if this claim is true, it doesn't mean it was a consequence of Christianity.
I don't exactly understand, I don't think anybody does, the relationship between fact and destiny. Well, they're different realms in a way, because
what do you mean by
knowing
destiny?
what the world is made of doesn't help you navigate through it. Not really. It doesn't provide you with a foundation for navigation.
He's wants to use this as a proscriptive thing, that this is the way to live your life because the ancestors passed this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. Like, it might have some guidance, it might have some tips, it might have some things to think about when you're doing things, making decisions, but it's not the end-all be-all, which I think he wants to treat it as.
Knowing the facts of the world is obviously useful. And the relationship between those two things, part of that's the mystery of Western civilization and the continued competition between science and religion.
Competition between science and religion in how to live your life? Is that the continuation of the thought there? So, that was the video. Again, I have a couple questions coming out of this. Like, what did he think this was going to be? Pretty safe to assume that he thought it was going to be him versus atheists. Sure. What was his side pitched as? Would he be there as a Christian, as a believer, or as Jordan Peterson? Because the debate bros come in hot with...
I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
If he wasn't there for that, then no, of course not. So, part of my curiosity, oh my god, is why this, why now? So let's see what he's up to. So, yeah, headers about the Peterson Academy, co-founder of the Peterson Academy, order my new book here, no link because of course not, unless, I guess that works, fine. Oh no, I'm not verified yet. Okay, so his wife is doing stuff. When was this video? A week ago. Okay. So his wife, not a week ago. Quiet strength leading from the bottom. Pushing the postmodern drinking song. We talked about that. So we're looking at like the 26th. So after that, or before that, He has a new series on the Daily Wire about parenting. Maybe. Jordan Peterson podcast with Michaela. Why now? Okay, when would they have filmed it? I wonder how much of a delay there is. I wonder if it's an indirect thing to increase traffic on this parenting thing. Try to get eyeballs back on him. And he does have a course on how to plan your life. I have it recorded. This is funny. Talked about this on my Discord. The Peterson Academy membership is down from 600 to 400 because they got independent financing or like investment or whatever. So rip to everybody who paid for a year at more than that. Yeah, I paid $450, I think, for a year. The early access, and then they bumped it twice. But now it's down to 400. Abortion is a symptom. Oh my god. I wonder when they would have filmed it. Oh, she's pregnant again? Oh boy. So, yeah, that was so much of a train wreck. I knew it was a train wreck. I didn't realize it was going to be that bad. The whole debate format for this is weird, especially with like the YouTube format like that. Post Ben Shapiro like debates. It's I don't even. Most debates, it's about who can do the best argumentation with the most flourish and whatever. It's not necessarily going to get at truth. I don't see the point in atheists debating a maybe Christian, maybe not, because, you know, he's cagey about being defined by labels like that. I don't see the point. And how many views does it have? Did I close it? Fuck, I keep closing it. You know, it's generating traffic because it's Jordan Peterson and a bunch of atheists. So, I mean, there's a benefit to Jubilee for doing this. Now you don't have to watch it. And if you're watching the not behind the scenes patron cut of it, you're going to get a very short abbreviated version of me being super frustrated a bunch of times because we're not even arguing his claims. So, yeah, that was this. If you like my sweater, you can buy it at Fourth Wall, link in below. Link in below. Yep. I've been at this a while. Catch y'all next time.